So with everything that has been going on this year, we thought it would be important to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion presentation. Without any further ado, I will turn us over to our own Brian Courtney. I will let you all know that you can ask questions at any point in time. There is also a chat box that you can post your question in, and you can post it either directly to Brian or to me or to everybody in the group. We'll be more than happy to use that to have question and answer time during the course of the presentation. So without further ado, Brian.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to give this presentation on a, on the note of, cycling off of the board this year. It was a great pleasure to serve with all of you. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed getting to know everybody and working together with you to further everybody's education on specific subjects that could be important to you. And my journey into this process was one of, Peter and his team said, look, would you be interested in doing a diversity, equity, and inclusion presentation, of which I said, sure, but I know really nothing about the subject, but I can become a quick study pretty quickly here. And of all the things that I've talked about in my career, this was the most important education that I've had, and it's ongoing too. So it never ends. And I would encourage all of you to, after this presentation, to further your education on this subject. I think you'll find it to be very rewarding and enriching by going through this presentation. So before we begin, I do want to ask the group, why is this important to you, and what are you hoping to get out of this presentation? So I'll pause there and just allow you guys to, throw out what you're looking to hear or see. This is the interactive part of the.
Hey Brian, this is Nick. I think one of the greatest things about diversity, inclusion, and equity is we're constantly learning, and we're recognizing the opportunities available with it. When we open our minds and we're able to talk about it and discover things like unconscious bias and how we interact on a daily basis, we start to recognize that it's something that is in our practices every day. And when we start to recognize that, we're more sensitive to it, and we become better active listeners with each individual, whether it's a patient, customer, whether it's in between our colleagues or our employees. And it builds engagement, and it allows for a better workplace and just a better interaction with everybody we deal with. So I think it's important that it's definitely on the forefront of what we're talking about, just because employee engagement is a very important thing in the workplace.
Great. Thanks, Nick, for sharing. Anybody else before I get to the next slide?
Hey, Brian, this is Dave Regan. For me, it's important because it so nicely aligns with my personal values. The fact that it's kind of good for business is maybe a plus, but really it anchors right to, where I try to come, how I try to approach people and situations. So just naturally aligns to that. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, David. Anybody else before I move on? Great. So today's goals. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to educate you on the subject. I'm going to teach you everything that I've learned and will continue to learn. And through that education process, you start becoming intuitively aware of things that are going on in and around you, and aware of the issues at hand. But more importantly, once you get through the education and awareness stages, then you can start to developing action steps that either the Pennsylvania MGMA board may take on, or within your own within your own organizations internally. So, and again, I encourage you guys to take your own steps towards being more aware, better educated, and taking action steps to creating a more diverse and inclusive environment. So let's focus first on diversity. Diversity is cultivating a diverse workplace. It is not the destination, but it's often rather the entry point to creating dynamic, innovative, and productive organization. It exists when the environment includes a variety of individuals, groups, and/or communities with different social and cultural characteristics, working styles, ideas, and experiences. When we talk about diversity, at all times we should try to avoid reducing ourselves or others to any one aspect of our identities. We are a combination of many different intersecting identities, which makes us authentically original versus monoliths. When employees downplay their authentic selves, and this is a really important point, when you downplay your authentic self, that negatively impacts the workplace's overall productivity, innovation, and ability to build strong and meaningful relationships with fellow colleagues. Just think of your best friends, right? That your best friends are the people that you can be yourself around. And when you are more of yourself, okay, you're a happier individual. And when you're bringing more positivity and happiness to the workplace, it increases everybody's productivity, it increases innovation, and it increases the ability to build strong and meaningful relationships with everybody. So again, the goal is to allow employees to bring more of their authentic selves to the table. So I talked about intersectionality, and this is a great slide, with a great graphic there. But intersectionality means we have multiple identities that intersect, such as gender, race, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, ability, work styles, and political views. Intersectionality is the ability to hold in our minds all of who someone is simultaneously, a skill that can be learned through practice and discipline. So I thought it would be a neat case study in my research on this topic to say what's a good case study of diversity and intersectionality. And of course, I bring it back to sports. So I'm going to put this question out there, and let's see if anybody can guess it. Who is the most successful sports organization in the world? In all of sports. Anybody have a guess?
Soccer.
It's not soccer, but it's a sport close to soccer.
Rugby
It is rugby.
in Australia.
Not Australia. Close. It's
New
these guys.
Zealand.
Let's see if the video plays. Give me 1 second. The videos aren't playing for some reason. Oh, that's a shame. Why isn't it playing? This might be playing now. Hold on. Can you guys see this?
Yeah, press the.
There we go. 1 second. I swear this worked before. Here we go.
And now the All Blacks just waiting for the French to peel off the tracksuits, stand in front of them and receive the challenge of the haka.
What you guys are watching right now is tradition of the New Zealand All Black rugby team. So I'm gonna move on to the next slide here. All right, so it skipped a little bit. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so what you guys witnessed was the story of the haka and the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team. So give you a little bit of background on the haka. The haka is a ceremonial Maori dance or challenge, right? So they stand in front of their opponents and they perform this dance, right? This intimidating dance, and it's meant to display the tribe's pride and strength and unity, right? The haka was really just considered for the Maori people of New Zealand, and there was discussion of discontinuing this tradition altogether within the New Zealand All Blacks. And the reason for that was the New Zealand society had changed, and the team was made up of much more than just Maori people, but Tongans, Samoans, Fijians, Europeans, and also the Maoris. So the haka that you just saw was actually the new haka, and it encompasses the new culture. Right? So how did they do it? All right. They would stand up and talk about the different cultures that make up their team. They even shared meals that represented one of those cultures after the talk. And this led to a greater understanding of the guys that they were playing with and a better understanding of New Zealand society. And then they asked, how are they going to create a legacy? What does it mean to be a New Zealander? What does it mean to be an All Black? And by deconstructing all of it, each player felt a connection and a purpose to their parents, their tupuna, which is their ancestors. And they felt, hey, we're all from the same land. Our ancestors are buried in the soil, and we have a connection to that land through family. And with the help of a cultural consultant, they started a conversation, a process of inquiry into the culture of being an All Black, past, present, and the future. And it was the genesis of the Kapa o Pango, which is the new haka. And the Kapa o Pango was reconnecting the Maori tribe along with reconnecting people from all different cultures into one thing. So the players could say, I understand this. I made these words. These are my actions. It's my country. It's my land. The results. The All Blacks are the most successful rugby team in history. They've been called the most successful sports team in any code ever. In the professional era, they have won an extraordinary win rate of 77% and have won 3 world championships. So it's a great case study of how getting to know different cultures and different backgrounds and weaving that all together creates success on the playing fields. And it could also create success within your own organizations and even Pennsylvania MGMA. So let's move on to equity. Equity is in the workplace is rooted in the fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement of an employee, while simultaneously attempting to identify and eliminate structural barriers that have prevented the full participation of underrepresented groups. Equity does not equal quality. Equality centers around uniform distribution of resources and opportunities. Equality assures unequal advantages to those who already have competitive advantages over others, and they may not necessarily need the same level of support as another individual. When we commit to building an equitable workplace, we must understand that different people will need different resources to be treated fairly. Providing the same starting line for employees doesn't necessarily mean that everyone starts from the same place. And this slide shows you the difference between equality and equity. All right. And I think the next video really illustrates the point of equity very well. One second while it loads up.
Winner of this race will take this. It's a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to
All right, so I'll pause it,
recognize that we've been given a head start.
pause it right there. What did you guys think about that video?
Very powerful.
In what way, Trace?
Well, it just makes you think about things that you may not have ever experienced in your life. Like if you never had to worry about some of those things.
Right. You know,
And they were everyday type questions, not,
Yeah.
not, yeah, everyday type questions that could affect anybody.
Yeah, and I kind of like the one point where it's not necessarily anything that the individuals did or didn't do. It was almost a matter of, circumstance. So it's no reflection on the individual, but more of circumstance and or environment. So they're not different in anything they did.
yeah, I agree with all of these statements. I'll give you a personal example. Friend of mine, we talk every morning. He heads up compensation for a large company, and there was a job posting for for a job within the company, and in working with the HR manager and setting the right compensation structure for the job posting, he took a look at it and he said, I'm really curious as to why this job requires a master's degree. And the HR manager said, well, it's something that obviously we would want somebody with a master's degree. And he goes, well, is it necessary to do the job? She's, well, no. And right then and there was a decision that was made by HR that eliminated a great number of people that didn't have a master's degree. Obviously, if somebody came across your desk that had a master's degree and wanted the job, they may move higher up in the recruiting process, right? But I think you have to look within your own organizations and saying, are we doing things that are creating inequities, not creating opportunities for people because of things that we want to have, not necessarily need to have. And by putting that job posting and putting those requirements of the job, they eliminated a great number of people within their own organization that were very well qualified to do the job, to go out and hunt for somebody that wasn't as qualified and didn't know the company culture or organization as well. So it's a great lesson that, he learned, when we were going through similar training on this, and saying, wait a second, we need to be a little bit more intuitively aware of these things and say, how are these creating inequitable advantages for certain individuals, right? So let's move on to inclusion. By the way, if you couldn't already tell, I love videos. They tell powerful stories. So that's not the last of them, and there's certainly a few more. So inclusion, what is inclusion? Inclusion in the workplace boils down to welcoming, respecting, supporting, and valuing the authentic participation of an individual or group. I've used the golden rule in other presentations, and I came to realize the golden rule stops short of really what we want to do. The golden rule is treat others the way that you want to be treated. Well, that falls short in an inclusive workplace. We should encourage to treat others in the way that which they want to be treated. All right, that's what we call the platinum rule. Now, most people have felt the sting of exclusion at some moment in their lives, even those who appear to have privilege. Like I give an example of this, like I've been in my sales meetings here at Safeguard Group. A lot of the guys in my sales meeting love to play golf. I stink at golf, right? So when we come in Monday morning and we talk, and they talk about how much they played and how well they did, I feel excluded from that conversation. Now, does that sting as what other exclusionary, instances in a workplace could be or would be? No. But again, it just illustrates the point. Even me, who's somebody who appears to have privilege, will feel excluded at some point in time, within the workplace. The best first step towards designing a successful inclusion strategy for a diverse workplace is to listen to what your employees are saying. Companies can hire voraciously to fix the lack of representation, but an inclusive culture that embraces all differences is the way organizations can keep that talent. If the goal is to retain our talent long enough so they begin to return that investment that we've made in them, not managing inclusion effectively is an obvious and frequent derailer, costing us more money over the long run. So I got to ask you, has anybody felt like they don't belong? Has anybody felt that? Well, this next video will share with you what that might look like. 1 second, it's loading. So I'll pause it there. And what do you guys think of that video? What were some of the thoughts that came to your mind? This is the interactive part, everybody.
I can share an experience that I had in relation to the motorcycle issue.
Yep.
One Sunday, when we were riding, we went out riding with several people. One was a physician, one person was an attorney, one person was a policeman, and another person worked at the university. And we went to a restaurant and they just ignored us, completely ignored us. And we ended up getting up and walking out. And they have no idea, just because of the clothes that we were wearing, they made an assumption. And that was a bunch of professional people there.
Right.
You know, that and we used to joke around because everybody rode Harley Davidsons. Those aren't inexpensive bikes.
Right.
Everybody had lots of money to spend, you know, the money that they just turned their back on, and they made that assumption, and they did themselves more harm that day by just ignoring. So I you know, can understand.
Yeah.
Kind of brought that memory back.
Yeah. Thank you, Tracy. Anybody else? Obviously, you know, when you go into a workplace, you know, in this particular scene, when they went into the movie theater and they saw nobody that looked like them or represented them, all of a sudden they had preconceived notions that they didn't feel like they were loved, or they felt like they didn't belong. And it didn't allow them to bring their authentic selves to the table. Now, with the exception, once the audience cracked open the beers and welcomed them with open arms, what do you think their experience was when they sat down and watched the movie? Probably one of the more enjoyable. They could be authentic. They could bring their authentic selves to the table, most likely. What if in the absence of cracking open the beers and welcoming them with open arms, what do you think their experience would have been watching the movie? Probably wasn't going to be the best, right?
Yeah, they weren't going to stay and watch the movie.
They weren't, but they might not have stayed, right?
Right.
You know, so, and that's what we're talking about within the workplace is, how do we help people bring their authentic selves to the workplace and feel like they're included and they belong? All right. It's a challenge for every organization, and it really boils down to biology. Really, I mean, you talk about Maslow's pyramid of needs. Beyond physiological and safety, love and belonging is right next to those things. We all want to feel loved. We all want to feel belonged, and we all want to feel valued. All right. And, a deep sense of love and belonging is an irreducible need of all people. It's biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to be loved and to love and to belong. And when we're not, those things are not met, we don't function as well as we are meant to. We break, we fall apart, we numb, we ache, we hurt others, and we get sick. All right. So again, it's a challenge that every organization needs to bring or to help solve. And the reason why you want to do it is it makes you a better company, and it makes the employees far more productive. So have you ever found yourself placing a veil over core aspects of your authentic self? All right. We call this covering. Okay. And covering is an action where an individual intentionally downplays or omits disclosure of a known stigmatized identity to fit in with the dominant culture. Okay, our beliefs, religion, political affiliations, disabilities, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation are traits we can work to disguise if we think we need to, particularly if those around us hold a negative perception of the traits, or if we perceive a stereotype threat. I've been told, don't bring up politics, right? Don't bring up religion, don't bring up, things about yourself, all right, to the workplace. And what that does, it ends up covering things that maybe you're deeply passionate about, right? And because you're saying, well, I can't share my political views because I don't want to be unfairly stereotyped. and this is, and I would say within the political climate, Peter, you and I were talking offline before this happened. Like, no, I don't want to get, the comment is, both made is like, I don't want to get political here, right? Because we want to distance ourselves from the identity of what political party you might identify with and what that may say about you. But does it really say a lot of everything about you? Probably not, but it's those negative perceptions that we want to say, I don't want people to negatively perceive me, so I don't bring those things to the table, all right? And sociologists have documented stereotype threat, which is a perception that one will be judged harshly because of a negative stereotypical expectation of a group to which one belongs. And it can create, performance anxiety and lead to exhaustion and burnout, in the workplace. So I think this is the last video that I share, but I love this video. It shines a light on what covering is and how damaging it can be. Come on. There we go. Gotta like beer commercials. They're the best. Here we go.
I would describe my political views as the new right.
I'd say that I'm left.
Feminism today is man-hating.
I would describe myself as a feminist, 100%.
I don't believe that climate change exists.
We're not taking enough action on climate change.
I think it's about time these people got off the high horse and started looking for credible problems that actually exist.
It's absolutely critical that trans people have their own voice.
That's not right. You can't, you're a man, be a man, or you're a female, be a female.
Women do need to remember that we need you to have our children.
Could I be friends with someone that says a woman's place in the home?
Right, okay, well, I'm an expert at flat packs. If you have any trouble, just watch me.
So it looks like I've got your instructions here.
I think so.
Let me help you.
It's not just that bit there.
Describe what it is like to be you in 5 adjectives.
Okay, frustrating.
Dedicated.
Opinionated.
Lucky.
Ambitious.
Offensive.
Solemn. I have ups and downs.
Strong.
I want to say attacked, misunderstood.
Name 3 things you and I have in common.
We're both male, we're both confident, and we're both loudly spoken.
We know each other better than people who've known each other for 10 minutes should.
You seem quite ambitious and positive, and you've got this really, got a glow. Do you know what I'm saying? Your aura's pretty cool.
I'm sensing, are you former military or something?
People have said that, but there is no history. So are you then ex-military?
Yeah.
If you're ex-military, I'm very proud of you already.
Well,
so
I grew up in a bit of a rough state. I've experienced homelessness. I've known what it's like to have absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely most grateful just for life.
We've only just met, but I think you're the sort of person that would listen to me and we'd have a discussion rather than argue.
Yeah, you could hang out with, man.
let's go. My chance.
Goodness sake.
You're right, mate.
Fitter than I look.
Perfecto.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
So basically, I think we just built a bar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here, each take a bottle and place it on its corresponding markings on the bar.
Attention, please now stand to watch a short film.
Feminism today is definitely an excuse for misandry, man-hating.
If somebody said to me that climate change is destroying the world, then I'd say that is total piffle.
So transgender, it is very odd. We're not set up to understand or see things like that.
I am a daughter, a wife. I am transgender.
I feel like the battle for feminism definitely isn't done. The fight is never going to be over, if I'm honest with you.
You now have a choice. You may go, or you can stay and discuss your differences over a beer.
I'm only joking.
You had me for a second then.
Well, I'm having a drink.
I'm having a drink.
Yeah.
I want to discuss.
Beer.
Yeah, beer and discuss.
Cheers.
At the end of the day, mate,
About
I've
reaching
enjoyed
out to
working with
people,
you.
yeah. And, you know, even if you wanted to convince people about your point, the productive thing to do would be to sit down and have a
Just
beer.
engage.
I've been brought up in a way where everything's black and white, but life isn't black and white.
Yeah, I'm just me.
Yeah.
Smash the patriarchy.
I'll give you my mobile number, you give me yours, and we'll keep in touch. I'd have to tell my girlfriend that I'll be texting another girl. She might be a bit upset with that, but I'll have to get round to it.
I'll have to tell my girl.
So I'll pause there. Thoughts on the video?
That's how I would like things to be.
In what way?
What they all said, which is we sit, we discuss, we don't argue.
Right.
I think having a batch of talking heads on TV screaming at each other 24/7, 365 across the spectrum, it doesn't matter, lends itself to people just screaming at one another and getting frustrated, meaning the way every one of these individuals walked in to the warehouse.
Right.
Not truly who they are, which is, I believe, at the end of the program, who they are.
I also found the order of things and how they put it together was unique in the sense that people didn't know about each other. They sat down and talked to each other first, got to know each other a little bit deeper, right? And I think that allowed them to start working together and building the bar and getting things set up. Once they started if they started with each other's differences first,
right?
What would the working environment or the collaboration have been like? You know, in my opinion, it might not have been as high. It might not have been as productive. They might not have jumped in and supported the other individual when they needed, they looked like they could use a helping hand. And we talk about the cultural iceberg, which is the next slide, and it's, there's certain things, that are, about us that are above the surface. People can see who we are, but there's a lot of stuff below the surface of who we are, and getting to know, individuals on a much deeper level will allow that people to feel, like they belong, like they're loved, like they're valued. Okay. So the 4 stages of inclusion, first, we belong. An inclusive culture is one where all employees feel welcome. Once, employees know that they are welcome, we can take another step by making them feel valued. We matter, you matter. And what we do matters. As employees meet their expanding expectations, we can take another step by making them feel personally and professionally respected. And then you hear what we say, as employees feel personally and professionally respected, they are much more likely to feel heard. Peter, you touched on this, right? Like you talk about the talking heads on TV, they find it more important to tell people what they want to say versus to listen and hear what the other person has to say.
And what's wrong with them? And it's and what's wrong with them? Like they start out with the differences and they maintain the differences. In fact, they may even grow during that 2-3 minute, interaction.
Yeah.
And very similar on social media.
Right. And I think too, like, there are certain things that you can just disagree with, right? And that's okay. But it doesn't mean that you're, just having differences in opinions is not something that should get in the way of actually reconnecting with somebody in a very meaningful way. Okay. So the final thought on inclusion: when a company commits to diversity, it commits to inclusion. Diversity is the mosaic of people who bring a variety of backgrounds, styles, perspectives, values, and beliefs as assets to the group and organization with which they interact. Inclusion enables us to strive to have all people represented and included within our organization and in our society, ensuring that all employees feel welcomed and valued not only for their abilities, but also for their unique qualities and perspectives. So how do we create an inclusive organization? You guessed it, it starts with leadership. Thoughts on inclusive leadership. Thoughts of legacy by an executive can certainly light a fire for change. It's really the individual change maker, that brave soul who stands up and still plays the most pivotal role in triggering that change. If that person speaks from the heart and backs it up with action, one can cause a landslide of a movement. Only leadership teams can make it real and make it resonate, but they need to find a connection point that excites them, an angle that they can internalize and believe in. And cultures change from the top, and leaders need to speak often and consistently about the environment they expect. There's a direct accountability between a leader and the next level or two down, and each CEO can and should set clear expectations around culture, behavior, and the workplace environment. The ability to lead inclusively is a top competency for leaders in the new age, and I'm going to touch on this quite a bit. And as organizational architects leading change, we need to get much more skilled at locating our purpose-driven workforce. So what often gets in the way? Change can sometimes seem vague, and it can seem limitless, and oftentimes it can feel uncomfortable or scary. Certainly it'll feel that way, especially for those that do not fully understand it, and they feel like you're taking something away from me. I'm not sure what, but you're taking it away from me. And again, another thing that gets in the way is the moment you say diversity, I think a lot of people think that you're calling them a racist or a bigot. They automatically go on the defensive, and they don't just want to have the conversation. And it's important to have uncomfortable conversations in order to grow from those experiences. Think about anything that you've ever done in your life, any skill that you've ever built in your life. All right. Skills don't automatically happen for a lot of people. It takes time, it takes work. Sometimes, it's uncomfortable, right? I'll give you an example. I used to be deathly afraid of public speaking. I kid you not. I had a very big problem getting up in front of a group of people and telling them what I knew, right? It was a skill that I said, I need to develop this. I think this is going to help me in my career. So I went through the uncomfortable process of developing a skill. And that's what we're talking about. If this is skill building, being an inclusive leader is developing a skill that can help grow your organizations in a positive way. But when you get into a situation where you're not sure where that skill is going to take you, and it's uncomfortable and it's sometimes scary, you automatically set it aside and you say, you know what, I'm not going to tackle that. And we need to start having those uncomfortable moments. All right. What does it take to be an inclusive leader? It takes cognizance, it takes courage, it takes commitment, it takes curiosity, cultural intelligence, and collaboration. These are the 6 inclusive leadership traits. So more on inclusive leadership. It's not just about the diversity of workers. It's a diversity of thought that makes the difference. It's not enough to check the boxes of inclusion. We must become students of the company culture, dismantling past structures and building a more flexible model that speaks to the way today's workforce wants to work and wants to be seen, heard, and engaged. Striving to be more transparent about diversity and inclusion is a good first step. The road to lasting and deep culture change requires time and commitment. The resilience and emotional intelligence to listen, to avoid defensiveness around intent, and to be curious about the information and passionate about the solution. That's where progress is made. I shared this when we were meeting in the virtual conference, where, I was the club president for my kids' soccer club. I'm one of the chief fundraisers of the club, and I raise money towards our scholarship program, which is a financial needs-based program for children that come from poor backgrounds who don't have the financial means to pay for our services. I love doing it. I love fundraising for it. And I know that by fundraising for it, I'm helping people from, disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds. Largely and a good portion of that could be the Hispanic and Latinx communities. And when I was raising all this money, I wasn't seeing that reflected in our membership with more Hispanic and Latinx players playing for us, kids playing for us. They didn't quite understand it. I'm like, wait a second, I'm raising all this money. Why am I not seeing it out on the field? So we changed the scholarship chairperson, and she came in and instituted a couple changes. One was they hired a third party to oversee the application process. So the board was removed from seeing actual applications of players or people coming into the club that are asking for money. All right. So making it more blind to the board of directors. The second thing was we put all of the information out there in Spanish. Now, my intent as a leader was to attract more Hispanic and Latinx players. That was my intent. And I failed at that miserably because I wasn't inclusive enough to put the information in a language that they would better understand and give them the support that they needed in order to actually submit the applications to come to our club. So I didn't get defensive about it. I just said, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened. I'm going to fix that. And you move on. I wasn't, it didn't matter what my intent was, right? What matters is getting it right, right? You can make mistakes with good intent. That's okay. It's, particularly in these areas, you're going to make mistakes when your intent is good. Don't get defensive about it. All right. Listen, learn, and move on from those things. Okay. And we don't need to reduce these dialogues to right or wrong. The goal should be to become more fluent in seeing both sides of issues and training ourselves with enough first-person data and research to be aware of our lens and to look through the lens of others at the exact same information and imagine how it might impact us and others. When you talk about diversity and inclusion, it can be painful, it can be awkward, and it can be fraught. A lot of the reading that I did on this, I got to tell you, it was uncomfortable to read. As a white male, it was extremely uncomfortable to read, but it was important that I did read it, that I learned about it, that I could see other sides of this. And that was where I was starting to learn to grow as an individual. All right. And I encourage you guys all to do the same. So let's talk about unconscious bias. I think Nick touched on this this matter earlier in the presentation, but attitudes, what is unconscious bias? It's attitudes and stereotypes of other social groups that negatively affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious way. Discrimination today is often an unconscious act, the result of how we tend to believe that the norms and experiences of our own social group, and that can be defined by a number of different things, race, class, gender, sexual orientation, whatever, or should be the same for every other social group. And the realization that they are radically different, that's unconscious bias. And combating our unconscious bias is hard because really it doesn't feel wrong. It feels right, but it's necessary to fight against that bias in order to create a work environment that supports and encourages diverse perspectives and people. So what are microaggressions? This is another term that is used in the diversity, equity, and inclusion topic. Microaggressions are brief, everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to certain individuals because of their group membership. It can be intentional or unintentional, and you got to think of it like death by a thousand cuts. And the best example I can say is, there's a tendency sometimes when we hurt somebody's feelings, right? And we feel like that slight, they're just being overly sensitive. Right? Oh, you're just being overly sensitive. But imagine if you're getting those slights every day of your life, and it doesn't feel like you're being overly sensitive because you're getting death by a thousand cuts. You're feeling it every day, right? So I encourage you when people come to you and say, I felt disrespected by that, or I felt you were being insensitive to me. Don't get defensive. Understand where that person is coming from, and then work to make them feel more included and say, I'm sorry that I made you feel that way. I'm going to try to do better to make sure that I don't do that again. And if it's all right by you, I'm going to check back with you in a couple weeks to make sure that I'm you know I'm treating you the way that you want to be treated. That is an inclusive leader. That is an emotional, intelligent leader, and that is something that we should all strive for. Any questions on microaggressions? So implicit culture is a workplace culture that overlooks the importance of aligning and informing an organization's inclusion values, beliefs, and behaviors in support of the overall mission or business strategy, leading to an unfocused culture strategy, dynamic, and poor business results. The opposite of an implicit culture is an intentional culture. So let's build a business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. When an organization overlooks the importance of aligning and informing its DEI values, beliefs, and commitments in support of the overall mission or business strategy, it is left with an unfocused or implicit workplace culture that usually benefits only the most enfranchised leaders. Corporate social responsibility strategies decrease risk and increase opportunities, which can help contribute to a sustainable global community while increasing an organization's profit margins. When it comes to creating more accessible services and products for people with disabilities, your business gains access to serving more than 1 billion people worldwide, or 54 million people in the US. Okay, that's a $200 billion in purchasing power. Same thing with the LGBTQ consumer loyalty. 71% said they would remain loyal to a brand that supports the human rights of LGBTQ, even if that brand's products or services are more expensive. And a millennial generation, okay, and we tend to think of millennials as this young generation. Let me point this out. The millennial generation is 25 to 40 years old. They are in the workplace, okay, and their annual purchasing power is $1.3 trillion, and 75% of them consider a workplace's DEI actions commitments before engaging with the business. So think of that from that perspective. The most talented people, it would serve you to believe, just statistically speaking, that a good portion of those 75% of millennials are talented people, the best talent that is out there right now that could be working in your organization. And they are considering what your DEI actions and commitments are before engaging with your business. That's pretty powerful. So what are they looking for? They're looking for consistent DEI practices. They're looking for diverse teams. They're looking for a purpose-driven organization with inclusive leaders that are socially responsible. And here's just some more final thoughts on the business case for DEI, okay? There's a linear relationship between racial and ethnic diversity and better financial performance, okay? So for every 10% you increase racial and ethnic diversity on a senior team, that rises the earnings before interest and taxes. Also, in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry medians, and those in the top quartile for gender diversity are 15% more likely. Think about it this: by 2044, more than half of all Americans will identify as part of a non-white group, and we as a country will become what is known as the majority minority nation. The population of those who identify with 2 or more races is anticipated to grow by over 200% in the next generation. African Americans, Asian Americans, and Hispanics have now a combined spending power of $3.4 trillion. LGBTQ has a combined buying power of $3.7 trillion. Triple bottom line is an accounting term evaluating a workplace's greater business value in relationship to the global marketplace. And this is what it is, right? So the triple bottom line: social responsibility, environmental responsibility, and economic responsibility create more sustainable businesses. So let's talk about economic responsibility practices, okay, and things that you can do. First, you can attend a professional supplier diversity conference. You can join local, regional, or national business chambers of commerce. You can strengthen your relationships with these business chambers. You can establish a supplier diversity program. And you can also establish an annual reporting process to assess your supplier diversity program efforts. Environmental responsibility practices. Purchase often products that are made with recycled paper. Purchase products with lower environmental impact. Use low impact transport for travel to and from work and business travel. Okay, avoid unnecessary travel by making use of technology. The pandemic has really shone a light on the use of technology to avoid travel, right? I think it's going to be here to stay. There are going to be more people working from their home now and not wanting to come back to the office. And then the last thing with environmental responsibility practices is to consider the sustainability practices of your suppliers as well. And then we go on to social responsibility practices. Dedicate professional development resources to grow and nurture young talent. Direct a portion of your profits to promote local, national, and global charitable organizations to tackle some of the social challenges that align with your workplace's purpose and values. Offer paid time off or giving staff the opportunity to volunteer for a local cause that aligns with their values and their beliefs. Offer company matching programs where staff donations to charitable causes are matched by their employer, and build community partnerships and engage with local businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies to help tackle some of the social change. Couple final thoughts on the triple bottom line. Diversifying your supplier pipeline has the potential to generate 133% greater return on the cost of procurement operations. Purpose-driven workers have 20% longer tenure, 50% are more likely to be in leadership positions, 47% are more likely to promote their employer's brand, okay? Have 64% higher levels of fulfillment in their work. Purpose-driven talent gravitates towards organizations with an established triple bottom line. 73% of millennials would spend more on a product or service if it comes from a brand committed to environmentally sustainable practices. 81% take it a step further, expecting their favorite brands to publicly declare their sustainability ethos. And 76% of millennial workers factor in an employer's environmental sustainability practices when determining where they will pursue employment. Millennials will make up more than 75% of the global workplace in 10 years. I'll stop there. Any thoughts that you guys would like to share?
Hey, Brian, this is Peter. I'd love to see, I'd love to ask the group whether or not their practice or hospital or system or company has developed their own DEI, and how inclusive were they in the development of this program? I don't know if anybody wants to just take a moment to just share the development of DEI within your practice or system or company.
Let me ask you this, and if nobody's willing to share, do you find that your workplace could do more in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion? And why or why not do you feel that way?
Hey, Brian and Peter, this is Dave Regan. I work for WellSpan Health in central Pennsylvania, and our company has taken a very proactive approach to DEI, and which I think is a positive, and internally has been received pretty well.
Yep.
I also think the second question you asked is like, how are we doing? That's a tough one. I don't know how you measure it, because I think counting qualities of people is not necessarily all that helpful. And I think it's one of those kind of journey analogies where you're always working on it, and you're going to bring new people in or have new ideals, and some might be disruptive, but we should adopt. Some might just be plain old disruptive. It takes time to work through all of that. And I think the other thing, it's real hard to tell under COVID. We are operating under a new set of rules, and I think we don't have a sort of a anchor point of what is normal in the COVID world to say, doing okay or doing great or doing terrible. So, but I think it's, again, it's I thought I might hear some grumbling about it. And I really has not been the case. I think people really do embrace it. People who work with people all the time kind of, I think, get it a little more than maybe people who have either been in cultures where this was accepted, and WellSpan is not one of those organizations. So anyway, just my observations from one place in the universe.
Thank you for sharing that. I can tell you, we've hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant at my, at the soccer club where I'm the president of the organization. And it was funny when we were talking with the consultant, we said, look, we think we're doing really well in this area. And he said, that's great. Like, it's great that you are. Like, how do you know? And we said, well, we just kind of look out the window and we kind of see that these things are happening. And he goes, well, let me tell you this. He goes, you have goals and aspirations of, getting grants and getting sponsors that actually would want to see what your DEI efforts are, would actually donate to an organization that can demonstrate that. And how do you demonstrate that when you're in front of them and you put your proposal in front of them and they ask you this question and your response is, well, we just know by looking out the window. So, DEI efforts do, require you to get some data points to say, okay, this is where we are now, and this is where we endeavor to be. You may never get there, but it's the effort towards diversity and inclusion that really, at the end of the day matters. And the more work you put into it, the better that the better results you're going to be. So, I'm a big believer. What doesn't get, what doesn't get measured doesn't get noticed, right? So, I mean, you have to start measuring your results and the type of environment that you would like to see. That doesn't necessarily mean that you hire for the sake of hiring. You still should try to find the most qualified person for jobs. However, it's where you're finding your talent that might need to change. As I mentioned earlier in my example with my friend, it's what are the job requirements? What are the skills that we're looking for? Do we need to help start developing those skills in certain communities so we can start attracting talent to our organization that would want to work for us? So these are just things that you should think about within your own organizations and say, how do we create a more inclusive environment? And it may require additional work for you, but that work will be rewarding. And as I laid out in my business case, the more you can demonstrate it, the more you can align that into your overall mission statement, the better off your organization is going to be in the long term. So 5 action items to build an inclusive organization. There's 5. Commit to continuous self-education. Apply an inclusion lens in your everyday work. Communicate the DEI business case. Get involved with the DEI efforts and take a leadership role. So I just, with continuous self-education, you should get familiar with the DEI terminology that we went over. You should seek knowledge of different cultures, identities, races, religions, working styles, perspectives, and backgrounds. You should also familiarize yourself with the challenges faced by people with different backgrounds. Participate in conferences and CE opportunities, and participate in community events from different cultural backgrounds. So, I listed a couple resources here, that that I've incorporated into this presentation here today. There's so many different books. There's so many more documentaries on Netflix and Amazon Prime that you can go to. But I encourage all of you to look at the or read these books, or even if you don't have time to read books, go to do the documentaries, or look for articles on these things. Even the videos, I think, that I shared with you today, doesn't require a lot of work. Most of them are less than 5 minutes, but those 5-minute videos were very impactful and get you to see things through a different lens. All right, which gets you to the next subject: apply an inclusion lens. First, embrace the platinum rule. Treat others the way they want to be treated. Commit to understanding your unconscious bias. Ensure productive team environments, and commit to serving as a workplace sponsor. So when you're talking about an inclusion lens, it's important that you should include these factors: people, place, process, and power. All right. So inclusion lens, people questions: who is positively and negatively affected by this issue, and how? How are people differently situated in terms of barriers they experience? And are people traumatized or re-traumatized by your decision area? When we talk about place questions, how are you or your decision area accounting for people's emotional and physical safety and their need to be productive and feel valued? How are you considering environmental impacts as well as environmental justice with respect to your decision area? And how are public and private resources, including investments, distributed geographically? Process questions. How are we meaningfully including or excluding people who are affected? What policies, processes, and social relationships contribute to the exclusion of communities most affected by these inequities? How are they empowering processes at every human touch point? And what processes are traumatizing, and how do we improve them? And then last are the power questions. What are the barriers to doing DEI work? And what are the benefits and burdens that communities experience with this issue? Who's accountable? What is your decision-making structure? And how is the current issue, policy, or program shifting power dynamics to better integrate voices and priorities of underrepresented communities? The third is to communicate the DEI business case. Commit to the process of understanding how DEI impacts your role and how your role impacts the success of building a more inclusive organization. Familiarize yourself with the DEI strategic goals. Share your message about the DEI business case and develop a DEI vision statement. And then start providing examples of other organization successes. I shared one today, right? I shared the example of the All Blacks, where they created a new haka that represented the Maoris, the Tongans, the Samoans, the Europeans, and the Fijians into a new haka, which they now can say, this is a part of us. We are a part of this. And that has now led to success on the field. So companies that have sometimes unwittingly or created insensitive products or approaches to new markets that misread or fumble the ethnicity, gender, culture, or geographic issues at stakes. Can anybody give me an example of that? It's most recent. Happened around this time last year. Come on, this one's an easy one.
Was it the Peloton?
Peloton?
Bingo! It is Peloton. And I'll get into that in the next slide. But Peloton missed the mark on their ad. They were hoping to attract a female audience to buy Pelotons or have their husbands buy the Pelotons for a Christmas present. And it came off as sexist to many consumers. So I'll get into that in the next slide. But when you're communicating the business case for DEI, promising employees who look at the org chart and don't see themselves, wonder whether there is a path to leadership for them. And employees often crave to see others of their heritage or background in leadership positions, seem to be looking for reasons to stay. And if you think you haven't lost a bid or a relationship, at least in part because of the diversity metrics, you're probably wrong, right? And if we spend all of our time saying, show me the data, and then decide it's not our fault, we are missing a key accountability of leadership, which is, of course, you guessed it, it's to lead, to ask the questions, to put ourselves in the role of the learner over and over again, and acknowledge there is much we don't know, to lead through service to others. And I mentioned the Peloton. So as I said, the holiday ad came off as sexist. It went viral on the internet, which caused Peloton stock to plummet by 9%. And it required Peloton to come out publicly and respond to and apologize for how the ad came off. Again, it didn't matter to consumers what the intent was, right? Didn't matter. They just deemed it to be sexist. And, we have to be careful about, comments or how we portray ourselves, because it could ultimately impact our organization in a negative way. So get involved with workplace DEI efforts, show up for DEI events, and join an employee resource group. I think Vic mentioned employee resource groups at PNC in our virtual conference panel discussion that he's a part of. Chair or volunteer with your organization's DEI advisory committee. If you don't have one, you should think about forming one. For organizations without employee resource groups, a DEI advisory council or mentorship program, consider advocating for their development. And consider becoming a sponsor or protege or co-mentor. An employee resource group is, largely a voluntary employee-led group, typically based upon an aspect of our identity or job function, and they often welcome allies interested in learning more. Okay, ERGs help an organization enhance employee engagement and improve services and products for new and emerging markets. They empower an organization to access a vast network of diverse talent and suppliers who can help an organization's workforce better reflect the communities they serve. I would say within healthcare, showing a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment is key, because you're serving many different communities. And I think you'll see that if there's more of a reflection of individuals in your staff, I think that'll allow your organizations to have better results in the care of individuals. Last is take a leadership role. It's understand the diversity elements you personally bring to the organization. Be a spokesperson for DEI issues that are not necessarily our own. And taking this action may elicit imposter complex, feelings of inadequacy. Remember, there is strength in numbers, and consider investing in DEI leadership and mentorship programs. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. Any questions?
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
We appreciate you taking time to put the presentation together and to present this to us. I know, well, I'll assume or presume that most of our practices and health licensing companies are indeed working on DEI programs, albeit in the midst of the pandemic. I don't know how many number one priorities we can juggle at the same time. So I am sure that everyone is dealing with, a number of issues right now. But for Pennsylvania MGMA, this will be something that we'll put onto the executive committee to keep the conversation going and see what we need to do to make sure that we do represent everyone that is part of our association and the industry as a whole. It's not something that's going to change overnight, but it is something that should be evolutionary, in my opinion. That is, to be evolutionary, and it has to be done in a respectful manner for everybody involved, membership as well as for those who are sitting in the leadership role. Does anybody have any last comments, questions, proclamations, declarations, or opinions they would like to share with this group?
I echo what Peter said. Thank you, Brian. I think it was really, really well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, you did a nice job, Brian. You illustrated good examples, and I do think even in my role, in more of like a financial role for healthcare, taking it a step further, I've done for my clients for private practices, small private practices. Last year, I did a couple presentations on like the millennial, attracting millennial patients, kind of having your office updated for millennials with technology, and attracting millennial doctors and or dentists to the practice, and kind of different based on the the Gen X or the millennials or the baby boomers, like how all those different kind of perceptions come into play, and how you can mesh those and make the transitions work. So I think that, every time I've done that presentation, the groups really enjoyed it, because sometimes you just don't think outside of, your own mindset. So I really like what you did today.
Thank you.
That said, then thank you again, Brian, and thank you everyone for the time that you offered to Pennsylvania MGMA today between the board meeting. We also had our legislative forum, which was actually very interesting for those of you who participated. And then for this program, be safe, be well, and as Tracy ended the call this morning, may we all have a very safe and happy holidays coming up, and enjoy. Thank you very much. And again, Brian, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks again, Brian.
Have a great
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.